Good morning, all. Today's CUNY BMI dialogue topic is mentoring with purpose. Mentoring is a journey built on relationships and partnerships. It allows us to provide safe spaces for our mentees to be comfortable venting, dreaming, planning, taking risks, and being vulnerable. I am Dr. Mahali Wathia, the director of My Brother's Keeper grant-funded programs with the New York City Department of Education, and I will be serving as today's moderator. I'm joined with 4 experts in the world of mentoring, training, development, and retention. We're going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves, and we're coming to you live here from CUNY BMI. We're going to have, starting with Mr. Mcfarland, introduce themselves, and then we're going to get right into our conversation today.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, let me just say that it is an honor and a privilege to be a part of this conversation and amongst all of you. I'm also looking forward to learning much about what you have done in the world of mentoring. So I look forward to how that's going to even enhance and sort of build on what I know and learn, and looking forward to that. So without further ado, I'm Alan Mcfarland. I am the Assistant Vice President for Outreach and Engagement here at New York University. It so happens that during National Mentoring Month, I'll be celebrating my 39th year at NYU. So I've been very fortunate to have a story to tell about my experience. And so that's something I think about. I'm also a veteran of the United States Air Force. I served in the military for many years. So as you know, there's some sort of connections there as well. I'm also a graduate of NYU. So I have a bachelor's and master's degree in higher education. And so I look forward to being part of this conversation. And I would be remiss if I did not say that if you are ever in Queens, please join us at the Brooks United Methodist Church, where we are led by Pastor Dr. Dolores Barrett.
Thank you. Now we're going to hear from Mr. Adams.
Good morning. Boy, it is really an honor to be with you, brothers. The work that you do is so very much important. I generally like to consider myself a player in the band. You know, I'm not much of a vocalist. I really can't play any real instrument, but I can keep time. And the guy on the cowbell or the guy on the shaker off to the side, that's me. He's not getting a lot of attention, but he's doing everything he can to make the sound full. I'm the director of collaborative education at Bronx Community College, as well as the advisor to the president on applicant affairs. I'm very much interested in what's happening, because mentoring is a part of our story. It's a part of our history, regardless of whether it's a formalized, design system or something that comes out of our traditional Black churches or other civic organizations in our communities. So I'm here to add my limited experience and the types of projects that I've been involved in, and to learn from the fantastic works that you brothers are engaged in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gene. We now have Keith Howard.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with everybody here today. I'm looking forward to having this conversation and having continuing conversation and dialogues with you all as we move forward. My name is Keith Howard. I'm the regional director of the New York State Mentoring Program. I've been working in this space of mentoring for more than 20 years, and I have to make the connection to Bronx Community College, which I am an alum of. It's a pleasure being here with you all.
And last but not least, Dr. Rodriguez.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bethia. Thank you, brothers. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be fantastic. I'm Dr. Michael Rodriguez. Everybody calls me Dr. Rod. I am the director of Kingsborough Community College's Black Male Initiative program called the Men's Resource Center. I am excited to learn, to grow, to share my voice. So let's take it away, Dr. Bethia.
All right, and with that being said, I just have to state how excited I am to be a part of this conversation with so many years of experience and expertise around the topic of mentoring. And as we know, I find it fitting that in this panel conversation, the goal of everyone on the call is really to learn from each other, right? And so I find that to be to be awesome in and of itself. And you're going to see why as we walk through this 45-minute discussion around mentoring and its importance. Our conversation will define mentoring and explore its impact. In addition, we're going to discuss the psychology behind mentoring and talk about why individuals choose to be mentors, the importance of advice, the importance and advice that any of our panelists are going to have around folks who are interested in being mentoring. And so we're going to just get right started with our first question, which is, and this is open to everyone in terms of our panel format, how would you define mentoring? What is it and what is it not?
Well, in one word for me, it's sacred. We're talking about connecting with someone's hopes, dreams, ambitions, and also their not knowing what the future will hold, particularly being a Black man. I'm gonna speak for myself, in terms of just thinking about my future, thinking about things that I want to get involved in. So it's sacred in terms of having that kind of conversation and dialogue with someone. So that word comes to mind for me.
If I can follow up with that very briefly, I absolutely agree with Alan. Mentoring is the taking of the sum of your experiences, your knowledge, everything you've learned, and passing that on to someone else so that every mistake you made, they don't have to make. I think at its core, it's really about knowledge transference, experience transference. That's ultimately about helping somebody else grow.
I would add simply that I think it's the key to the culture. We pass on our traditions, and we pass on those traditions in numerous different kinds of ways. But one of the ways that we pass those traditions is through mentorship or guildship or some system where the next generation, taps into that tremendous source of wisdom and awareness that defines us as a people.
And I'll just add into all of it. I think mentoring is a really fluid thing. And I think that's one thing that's really great about it. If you actually go and look to define mentoring, you'll find, depending on what industry you're looking at, the definition might be a little different. But the reality is before the word mentoring ever came into our vocabulary, in our villages, we had our elders who understood the need to then share the knowledge so it can be passed on. So I think that the best way to look at it is understanding that it is a passing of the torch, it is a passing of that knowledge, and a very fluid thing that exists throughout many industries and communities.
I love what we said around kind of just the fluidity and the morphing of mentoring amongst, depending on who you are, what your field is, what you're looking to engage, or what you're looking to get out of that. I think the question that I want to ask is really around foundational mentorship, right? And so when we're thinking about mentors, right, and the first part of our conversation is really going to define and really look and examine the mentor, and then we're going to switch to the mentee. But for mentors, are there specific qualities, traits, skill sets? If I'm interested in serving as a mentor, are there just foundational characteristics that we found to be tried and true in our experiences? I'm interested to hear what folks have to say about that.
Well, I'll jump in. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was struggling to unmute. I think that the reality is again, depending on the program that you're putting together, will really depend on how you want to go about selecting your mentors. Your mentors are incredibly important. But I think that more importantly than the mentors and what they may bring to the table outside of willing to be vulnerable, making the commitment, willing to be consistent, willing to put down their arrogance, and learn and guide with young people, I think that is important that we understand that these mentoring relationships are really about the personal relationship between a mentor and a mentee. And the reality is just really hard to say this would be the perfect mentor. And I'll say that to say I've had a mentor in my life, Malik. I have to mention his name. He's been my mentor since I was about 15 years old. And I loved Malik, and I think that he was instrumental in helping me grow and become the man that I've become. But I'll always tease him and tell him I don't know if I'd let him mentor in any of my programs. Right. So it really is about the connection between two people and somebody's willingness to have that commitment and be vulnerable in that space.
Other thoughts?
I think I believe a vision. I think a mentor needs to know where he wants to go, or where he wants to help that person take the next step towards, and then have a sense of humor. Because being a mentor, and specifically if you remember when you were a teenager and some of the wild and crazy concepts that you developed and you brought forward to your mentors, they had to have a sense of humor to deal with you because you were off the chain. And I think that they have to have that flexibility, that sense of humor, a sense of empathy. But I think a core component is that they really believe that there is a road for you, and they're going to work with you to help find that path. I go back real quickly, and a lot of my presentation will focus on my own childhood. And before I even heard the word mentor, when I was in the barbershop or when I was in certain spaces, and there was this mentorship kind of going on. Sometimes it was outrageous. Sometimes it probably would have gone against all the fundamental rules of classical mentorship. But that space was very important to helping us begin to develop, the foundation for a lot of the skills that we have now. So for me, the vision, I think, is a key element.
I'll just add that guiding principles come up for me. What are your guiding principles? Sort of examining what that is. And then the second thing I think about is just belief in what a student can do. Are you actually projecting that? Do they see a welcoming, supportive person in front of them? Do they see someone who has gone beyond what James Emmanuel talks about when he said if he were on this earth and someone from Mars came down and saw him, what would he think and say about his identity? So some of this is really about giving the student to tell us who they are and being very careful about defining them in terms of what we see. I know we get that intellectually, but I think someone mentioned it about, I think Keith talked about I believe it's the longevity or the length of time that it takes to do that for it to unfold. So I appreciate that. And Keith, I love what you said about the vulnerability. Whew, that's a hard one, boy. I don't want to talk about my failures because I know I failed. And so some of that is really about being real, about vulnerability. And another word that comes up for me, and I thank you again, Keith, for making me think about this, and that is humility. I don't know it all. So the guiding principles, humility, vulnerability, and letting it unfold in terms of just an approaches in terms of being and thinking about what it means to be a mentor.
Just to echo my brothers here, the word that pops up for me is character. Fundamentally, you have to understand that as a mentor, that mentee is trusting you, believe it or not, with their life. It on the job, it may be their career. In the education setting, it could be their positionality for their career, because that's what education really should do, position you for your career. And if you have to be a person of deep character, to echo what everybody said, you have to believe in that person, but they also have to trust you and believe in you. Believe that it's like this thing. Mentors have to believe in the mentees when the mentees don't believe in themselves.
Dr. Rodriguez, you still with us, good brother? He just dropped that mic there. I mean, because it's a powerful statement to make, right? We have to believe in our mentees, even in times that they are uncertain and unsettled in their trajectory. So what a way to drop the mic. Dr. Rodriguez will be joining us shortly. But I want to pivot a little bit. Well, actually not pivot, but build upon. And so I'm somewhat interested in being a mentor. I am willing to be vulnerable. I'm willing to be humble. I have the space and time and commitment to be consistent. Talk me through what you and your experiences have noticed as an era that someone that has all the stuff we just talked about can make potentially in building a mentor-mentee relationship.
I want to say this, and I say this quite often as I'm training people. Dr. Rodriguez, before he jumped off, he was talking about optimism, which is really, really important as it relates to not only being optimistic about what your mentee can do, but optimistic about what you're lending to the mentoring process. I think that's really important. I tell mentors, you're perfect just the way you are. Everything that you bring to the table is valuable experience. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm suggesting that you sit down with a mentee and tell them your life story and everything that you've done well and everything that you may have had challenges with, but to be able to bring that into the relationship as you're working with somebody, remembering you were once young, remembering that, that you've made mistakes before and had the opportunity to build from those mistakes. So I think that people need to go in willing to not only guide, right? Because there's something that brought you to mentoring and you have to trust that. Right, there's something that spoke to you that said, I want to come in and help and support somebody, but be willing to grow as they're working with the young person that they're with. And I think if you have those things in place or in tow, I think that you're off to a really, really good start.
I think that
also your,
go ahead, Gene.
thank you, your audience, because your audience and their needs and change. So what our expectations are, we have to be keenly aware of ourselves in that particular area. I've worked with middle schoolers, high school students, and of course, university students. And I have to continually remind myself of what sphere I'm in and what that communication means. And when I start laying out expectations and those kinds of qualities or issues, I have to kind of like really know where I'm going. And I think sometimes we may put either not enough and sometimes too much emphasis in a certain direction or on a young person. So I think we really have to know the group. I worked with young people in incarcerated situations, foster care and adoption, homeless shelters, the university, psychiatric facilities, and it all shifts. And I think Keith said it from the beginning, the need for fluidity in terms of how we approach and what we take into these spaces. Everything does not fit every situation.
I love that question, and that sort of makes me think about my own preparation. First thing I would do is recommend that you all read Keith's document on mentoring, which is like awesome. I wish I had that when I started this process. So certainly want to lift up continuing education. So Keith, thank you so much for that. I mean, I think this is a really important document there, and looking forward to seeing more how you can share that with all us community in terms of your own program. Second thing is, this is one I think is really good, and that is in terms of mentors, our own complexity. Ralph Ellison talks about the complexity of the Negro experience. I don't know, I'm regressing, going back to Negro. We can keep going back and forth. I'm testing the Negro thing because, hey, the complexity is an important word that Ralph Ellison talks about, as you know, in the context of a miserable man. So recognizing our own complexity, in that, we're so many things in terms of just being one thing. We're many things. I think that's important to remember. third thing is privilege. I got to recognize my privilege. You know, students get an email from the assistant vice president, and they're like, "Who's this guy?" And what is he doing? And sometimes they could be intimidated by not only your position, but let's talk about you're just being a man, being a male. I think just recognizing that privilege and thinking about that level of interaction. Just two more quick things: the listening part. Listening. Less talking and more listening, in terms of giving our mentees an opportunity to sort of get to the point where they want to share. Not to mention that some of our mentees, as you know, are introverts. I'm an introvert. I don't know how I got the job of outreach and engagement when I'm an introvert, but that's a whole nother thing. Because my mentors probably helped me with that. Actually, they did. And then finally, full circle, going back to what Keith said, and thinking about his work, the whole training piece, continuing education piece. I think it's a learning process. I'm no expert. There's a saying about just when you think about you have all the answers, the questions change. So that's an awesome question, Dr. Bethany.
I think what resonated with me was this communication piece that has been brought up, right? I think that to add on to what the other brothers on the call have said, this importance of communication and setting those expectations, right? Because I think sometimes in our heads as mentors, we have a vision of what we think it looks like or what it should look like and what it should sound like. But sometimes that may not be aligned with what the mentee is looking for and looking to pull out of the relationship. So I think, and Jean having mentioned to this, the importance of us being mindful of how we're communicating with our mentees. I see that usually as a potential pitfall for a new mentor, right? They can, kind of over communicate and almost fend off or scare off the mentee. And then to what Alan said, the importance of understanding your positional spacing and placing, right? Like if you're a supervisor, if you have a certain title, these things do impact or have the potential to impact initial relationship building. I also want to mention that the document that Alan was talking about, that New York State Mentoring has created, and Keith is a leading expert around this work, and so I want to name that, right, for everyone on the call. Will be available via link in the YouTube for this. For this panel discussion. So for those who are interested, know that you will have access to that document. And thank you for your contributions. I see Dr. Rodriguez, you're back with us. You dropped that mic before you left, brother. The question that we were asking was just really around common or potential pitfalls or mistakes that a new mentor may experience in your own experience.
Yeah, I think, thank you, brothers, for your patience. But I think one of the biggest pitfalls I see is mentors, how do I say this, wanting it more than their mentee wants it, right? And they want it so bad that their passion kind of overrides, their mentees' ability to accept that passion and fervor, right? So I think all mentors need to really understand that this is maybe not a long-term game, but it may be a little longer than you think. I think Keith touched on that in the very beginning. There's a process to this, and a mentor has to respect the process. And just because you call yourself mentor and they call themselves mentee doesn't mean the process is solidified. That takes time. So a mentor has to be patient, has to be willing to understand that, hey, this is going to be a process. Yes, there's some things that I think I can share with this person, but it's going to take some time.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Dr. Rodriguez. So I'm hearing a lot of things. I'm hearing the importance of our mentees, particularly as they're building these relationships, to be patient, consistent, humble, to be able to ensure that they are being vulnerable, right, with their mentees, to be mindful of where they sit kind of in the in the overall world of that mentee, whether that means that they have a positional authority or that they have some sort of supervision authority, right, to be mindful of that. And so thank you, brothers, for sharing that. And
I just add another
yeah,
word,
of course.
because I wanted to make sure it got on the list, and that is the importance of building trust.
Yes.
Trust, so I know that word is in there. Just wanted to name it. The time and effort it takes to have the mentee trust you. So the mentor has to certainly be thinking about that as a process as well. I thought you were going to say transparency before, Dr. Bethea. I think that was the word that came to mind when you were sharing as well.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. And I think we've also, and Jean had made mention to this, right? This importance of doing the initial communication work, right? To ensure, because we know that what we do know for certain is that trust is not built over a short-term period, right? We know for a fact that in order for us to build trust, and that was really powerful what you said, Alan, around the need for us naming the trust factor, because sometimes we do assume, right, that because this person wants a mentor, they will trust us because they want the relationship. And that is not to be assumed. And so I think that that's super important that you named that for us. And so we've talked a lot about kind of the composition of the mentor. I'm interested to hear from folks. It sounds like a lot of work. It sounds like being a mentor is a lot of work. Like what's the value added for the mentor? And I'm interested to hear this either from the experience that you have each had as mentors, and or the experience you've had in training, growing, and developing other mentors.
Oh, I'd like to jump in. I'll say this. So when I look at mentoring, although we tend to focus on the mentee or the youth that are involved, the reality is, or my experience has been, that mentoring is good for the whole community. Right. So we've seen examples specifically in, the DOE, the program that I partnered with them in some years ago, where we saw that there were improvements, definitely in the area of behavior. There was improvements not only to the young men who were participating in mentoring, but school-wide, right? In these schools that ran this program. So we understand that mentoring is not something that is solely for the mentee, but it impacts both the mentee, the mentor, and the community or industry at large. So for mentors, they have to understand, if you are considering some of the things that we've thrown out, right? If you're willing to be vulnerable, if you're willing to be honest, if you're willing to be a good listener, what you'll find is that you will fine tune your own skills, right? To be able to sit down and talk to somebody who says, hey, I'm not sure how to get this done, and be willing to say, I'm not sure either. Let's start to go through the exercise, or let's start to go through the steps to get this answered. You'll find that you will retool or refine your own ability, not only to go through those steps, but also to help educate and mentor young people across the board.
I think, when I have this kind of conversation, I find myself intellectually and I guess on a deeper visceral level, moving in and out of spaces within myself. One of those spaces is, I'm a Ivy League educated, blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, I'm a guy who came out of an environment where I needed mentoring. And I received mentoring from, numerous sources coming up. Some of those sources were formal groups, and some of them were informal. So you ask the question, well, why do we do it? Because I realized that my survival and my achievement and my sense of self-awareness and belief is really linked in to what happened to me. And what I saw didn't happen maybe to some of my contemporaries, some of the kids I grew up with, or some of the young men I was with. So I'm never far removed from my own situation. And that situation has both considerable achievement and considerable trauma. So I know what we need in terms of how important it is for a young person specifically in our communities, to see a face like mine and to get from that face a sense of earnest belief that you can do this and I'm going to be here with you. So for me, I have a buddy I talk to on the phone real quick. And a lot of times we talk late at night and, we say, man, all right, man. All right, I'll check you, get up there tomorrow and just go do it again. And I think that's our belief. It's like every day we have to invest in this. I'm not investing in what I'm doing simply because of my educational or my professional experience or position. I'm doing it because I love Black people. And I love the idea that the only people who can save Black people is Black people. And that's it. Everything else comes as a magnetic force towards that. But that's where I began my struggle.
I have mentored young Black and Latino men through two programs, Brothers for Success and the Network of Black Men. And one of the things that always rings true is, even though we talk about our individual complexity and even though we talk about our individuality and our own journey, there is the history of enslavement and our shared experience contained in our multiple identities that creates a dissonance as we think about our own identity. And so that level of complexity is something to be thinking about. So the shared experience is huge, particularly if I'm talking to or thinking about or engaging other Black men or brown men or anyone who happens to be my color and sets foot in America. So the reality is that in some way, shape, or form, they may have that shared experience. So I think thinking about the mentee, just being reminded of that fact that they are still being exposed to or experiencing the microaggressions. And let's go right back to George Floyd last summer. I mean, there are countless examples where there are injustices that remind us that some of our mentees are experiencing it. Thank you, Gene, for that word, trauma. It is a huge concern in terms of thinking about how important mentoring is. So, yeah, and thinking about the mentee, particularly when I'm thinking about Black men, I'm thinking about that shared experience and what role does the history of enslavement play in their identity and their journey, and the dissonance that it may create as a threat to their ambition.
When I reflect on mentees, I think about, there are certain realities that every mentee must face. One of those is, I don't have all the answers. My mentor doesn't have all the answers, but together we're going to try to get some answers. And I think that's the perspective that I think every mentor and mentee needs to take, that this is a journey that we're taking together. So many of the young men and women I mentor in my program at Kingsborough Community College and outside of CUNY have this idea that the best mentors are the ones with the most money. And I step back and say, your mentor is not transferring money to you, they're transferring knowledge. So the best mentor is the one who has a breadth of experience that they can translate to you, because not everybody can translate their experiences to you. So I think that's part of what makes a good mentor, right? So a mentee has to understand that, the real value in mentoring is the knowledge and the information and the experience. It's incredibly powerful to take 20 years of somebody's experiences, codify it and live out that lesson, right? So that 20 years of mistakes I never have to make. And I think that's a powerful, powerful thing. I think mentees should grasp and hold on. And I think it's really okay for mentors to remind their mentees that ultimately this is about experiences. This is about knowledge. This is about the sum of my life. I'm handing it to you. All you have to do is ask.
I have a daughter, and as anybody with parent know, your daughter or your son, when they get to be a certain age, they know more than you, no matter what you think.
What?
They know more than you. My dad, so one time I told my daughter, I said, look, and I heard it somewhere, I'm not telling you what I'm telling you because I'm smarter than you, or because I want to show you that I'm the alpha around here, or that I have this broad knowledge base. I'm telling you, and I'm showing you what I'm showing you because I've made more mistakes than you. I've had opportunity to fall on my face more times than you. And to a certain extent, we have to admit also that in this particular time, a lot of our young people and even our own children are not as resilient. They don't come through a culture that were as resilient as we may have had to have been. And oftentimes with your own children, you've provided for them certain things that you never had, but that you had to struggle to get. And now they take those things as being kind of, this is normal. I'm supposed to have all this stuff. So we have to work with that. But I think that through the mentorship process, what I try to work with young people is understanding the difference between self-confidence and self-concept. Like Michael said earlier, sometimes young people like the guy with money. And specifically, since we're dealing with social media and other forms of communication that emphasize that as being quote unquote success, that is projected as a sense of self-confidence. Or, hey, those of us who grew up around drug dealers or even bullies, they were always self-confident. They drove nice cars, they had the bling bling. But what I try to, with my mentees, where we start at is, what is your self-concept though? Because self-confidence and self-concept don't necessarily go hand in hand and may not even be necessarily good in the same direction. So for me, it's about understanding and learning how to see yourself through some of the limited experiences or perspectives I may have. Because one thing I know about being involved in mentorship is that most mentors need mentors, and I think a lot of us rely on that.
Right.
What were you gonna say about that?
I just wanted to just share that, Albert Murray, who was good friends with Ralph Ellison, talked about young people, and he said, yeah, they just got here. They just got here. How do they know, all the things that's happening, and in terms of, he used the word actuality. So I certainly want to recognize that. But then there's the other thing that's sort of almost a question to everyone, and as I'm thinking about this, is also how do we make sure, and I'm asking myself, how do I make sure that we honor, their value, their importance? How do we make sure that we keep that up on an even level in terms of to helping them to understand how incredibly wonderful it is for you in this space and time, even though it's challenging, that we're excited for you, that we see great things for you. And so how do you also make sure that there's this balance between you just got here and then there's this heightened value that you all have? And another word that came up was this whole notion of affirmation. In terms of affirmation was like something that really came up for me. And as you can tell, running in the background for me, I'm always thinking about my mentees and what are they reading? What are we reading? Or what are we sharing and reading together?
I'll piggyback off of that and say this. I think we, as we understand, again, that mentoring can look a lot of different ways. When I sit down and I work with programs, one of our main focuses is making sure that we're doing the work that's going to empower the young people that we're working with. So one of the messages I give a lot of mentors, and I tell them, here's a nugget for you. This is from me to you. You don't have to have all the answers, right? You do not have to have all the answers. But what you should be willing to do is be a good listener, have the patience, and be open-minded as you work with the young people and you walk them through the process. So I understand that when I'm working with some young person, and the word humility came up earlier, and I'll bring that back. I understand that while I'm working with a young person, I may have done things that worked for me, right? Because of the community that I'm a part of, because of the family I'm a part of. Anybody who knows me will hear me say Malik, 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 Malik a number of times, right? Who was my long-term mentor. But you may not have those things in front of you. So I had Malik in this, as hard as I may try, I may never be able to be Malik to you. But what I can do is I can be patient and I can be willing to take this journey with you, understanding that even if we don't get to where we're trying to get to, where we set out to get to right away, that there is value in the experience and the exercise of learning how to take this journey. So for me, a lot of times when I talk to a young person, it really is about what is it that you would like to accomplish? How do you think we'll get there? And where you stop being able to explain is where I pick up and start guiding. So
Yeah, no, I love that. And I'm hearing two things are really hitting me as I'm listening. One is this concept of empowerment versus impart, right? Kind of like the line that we as mentors have to walk between our desire to impart knowledge, right, and to share, so that way people don't make mistakes, and also our ability to take an empowerment stance and to listen and to understand that it may not be the desire of our mentor or our mentee for us to problem solve through everything with them. And the other thing I want to just name on the call is that mentor mentee relationship is not necessarily age, right? It's not a direct correlation. And I'll use my own experience when I was a school principal. There was an administrative intern, mind you. She's twice my age. I was a new principal, and she came, and said, I'm interested in doing an internship with you and being mentored. And my response, and using the characteristics that the brothers on the call spoke to, right, that humble, I was like, listen, I'm a first year principal. I don't know nothing. But you can sit with me and learn with me. You can, like, I'm open to you, like, watching me make these mistakes. And she was like, that's exactly what I wanted, right? And it wasn't, and so I think that it's important that as we're thinking through what mentoring looks like, and the word fluid was mentioned, that we have to understand that, one, the fluidity of kind of how we engage with our mentors and mentees will change over time, right? The same person who wanted to kind of sit with me at one point, that eventually shifted, right? It shifted to now she wanted to learn very specific things, or she didn't want to learn anything. She just wanted to, like, talk through her own process. And I think that sometimes, and we talked about pitfalls earlier, one of the worst things we can do, in my opinion, is to not honor the evolution of the relationship with our mentee, right? On acknowledging that may, and most likely, if we're doing a good job, change over time. I'm interested in people's thoughts on that.
I'm sorry, guys. I just want to jump in because you said something that triggered something for me. So you hear me say Malik, 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 Malik. I do it purposely to honor who he's been in my life, right? So if you don't remember anything else, you remember the name Malik. And I had a conversation with Malik a couple of years ago. And in that conversation, he started to say things to me that intimated, hey, we're now on the same level, right? And it was funny because, funny enough, I didn't want to be on the same level with Malik. I'd like the setup just the way it was. That Malik was my go-to, and Malik was the one that I trusted and believed in, and felt comfortable following his lead. And now he was pushing that away from me, or at least that's how it felt. But what I understand being a father as well is that when I'm with myself or my daughter's mother, when we're talking to our daughters with the understanding that we want you to learn now, so that when you're not in front of us, you know what to do, right? And I'm happy and also kind of sad to say that I've reached this point that I've been able to absorb so much of what he's provided me throughout the year, that now I'm in a position to say, when I get out there, I've had enough tutelage that I know what to do, whether Malik is around me or not. So it is very important to understand that, you know, as the elders now, we're mentoring these young people, but we're mentoring them to be elders one day, right? So that relationship does change, and it's an honor to have somebody in front of you that you can say, "Hey, I helped them, or I've done my part in my community to help them move into this next necessary role in our community."
Yeah, I think Booker T. Washington said, character, not circumstances, makes the man. And I think that's what Malik is, you know, and before I got on the call, I wrote down some experiences, and I wrote down, like Keith, the names of these people from, I'm going back to when I was 9. I can write down, I can tell you exactly who those individuals were, from Mr. Howard Davis Sr. to Alexander Whitaker, my Boy Scout guy, to, you know, the youth center. I can tell you who they were because they were those elders, you know, and they were doing exactly what it is that we've committed ourselves to. And they were laying down the roadmap for me, because everything that I've done since then has been based on the skills, the perspectives, the sense of understanding that I've gotten from a wide range of experiences and people. But the root are this group, you know, who whenever I take my kids, I take children, you know, from middle school to university to West Africa. That goes back to Mr. Davis. You know, whatever I do, I'm honoring, like Keith says, my Maliks. And I think it's critically important to me that I keep them in the forefront of my thinking, because what I've done is pivoted off of the phenomenal things that they introduced me to. And I've taken those things, and Carl, or this one gentleman, he was a camper. So I spent, you know, my adolescence in the woods. So I've pivoted off of that, and I've taken that same experience, and I've taken kids into the bush in West Africa, fundamentally off of the same sense of skill sets and ideas that these other individuals have imparted upon me. So I'm with Keith that every day I thank God for having had the experience of being under these folks. And believe me, I write their names down and I say their names frequently. And I think that's very important.
Hey, Brother Gene, I appreciate that. And I wanted to ask you a question really quickly. Did you know Dean Remson?
No.
Okay, so Dean Remson was a dean at Bronx Community College, and he's another name that I have to honor, because I got to tell you that this man saw something in me way before I saw it in myself. And his idea was that if I give this young man, and I mean, you're talking about rough around the edges, you're talking about arrogant, you're talking about I have all the answers already at the right age of 19. I know everything that it needs to be, that I need to know. This was a gentleman that I was fortunate enough to have in my life that said to me, "I think you're ready to start getting ready." I thought I was ready. He said, "I think you're ready to start getting ready." And he put me in some positions that I don't even know that I deserve to be in. But because he did it, it allowed me to elevate and develop myself. So he's another person who worked at Bronx Community College that I have to identify, Dean Remson.
Thank you.
I am most certainly interested to hear from the panelists, you know, as we come to, and thank you both for sharing that out. I think it's fitting as we wrap up this conversation about mentoring and its importance and its impact, to speak about and talk up the Maliks of the world, the deans of the world. And so if there are any panelists that have particular individuals that they want to speak up, and the push here is to talk about the moment of change in your trajectory, right? Everyone on this call has someone or someones that we contribute very specific levels, changes, switches, developments in our lives to. And as we wrap up our conversation, I think it's only fitting for us to speak those people up.
Well, let me share Dr. Roscoe Brown, the former president of Bronx Community College. He's also an alum of New York University, where he received his doctorate. He's also the first person who created the NYU Institute of African American Affairs in 1969. And as you all know, he's a Tuskegee Airman. So I met him at an event at NYU, and I introduced myself to him, and he said, "I know who you are." And I almost fell out. He said he knew who I was. And so pretty important about importance about those levels of engagement in terms of how you have those one interactions and how they change your lives and how it helps with your trajectory. So I just want to name that as a recent before he had passed away. And all I did was kept thinking about it. I'm saying, how does this man know who I am? And then it was just, I was just taken aback by the fact that, you know, we had that kind of conversation. So I guess it just reminds me of, you're right about naming and just honoring folks who continue, what, the lift as we climb, as we know. So I just want to invoke and also connect with Bronx Community College and Dr. Roscoe Brown. Thanks for that question, Dr. Bethea.
Let me jump in real quick. And, you know, for me, Professor Kenneth Wheeler, professor in my undergrad, who, again, saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And that wasn't even a inkling in my mind at the time. You know, Dr. David Gomez, former president of Hostos Community College. He worked at Kingsborough for a long time, mentored me throughout my career. A guy I went to high school named Lee. He doesn't even know he mentored me. But I talk about him all the time as part of my story. We just had an interaction one day, and it led to a group of conversations where he mentored me. And I didn't realize it was mentorship. And it really set me on a path to really kind of see myself more than I saw myself. So, you know, Lee, thank you.
Ooh, and for me, gentleman by the name of Jonathan Foy, he was my first principal. He hired me, but that's not the moment. The moment was one day I happened to be in his office, and I've always kind of seen him at, you know, I didn't really see that many men of color in these leadership roles in K-12. And so here's this man in the Bronx, founder principal of a school, and he had asked me to do a task. And I was sitting in his chair because I had to do it on his computer. And he walked into the office and he looked and he said, "You know, brother, you look really good in that chair." And that moment, I was like, yo, I could be a principal. Like, I could do this, you know, like it was that moment. I don't even know that he realizes or remembers ever saying it, but I will never forget him saying that, right? Like this guy had always been giving me opportunities, but it was that moment where he made that statement and affirmed me literally being in the seat of the principal, that I was like, yep, I'm going to be a principal now. And just a few years later, just, you know, 4 years later, I opened up my own school. And so I think it's important as we talk about mentoring and as we go through and engage in Mentoring Month, that we name these people, not only for what they did to us, but the moments in which they did it. Right? Because these are the things that folks will never forget. And I most certainly am thankful to Jonathan M. Foy, my first principal and my first principal mentor, who did that work for me.
You are.
You are, yes.
Nice. And I have,
the world is too small.
Let me
Jonathan
say
and
this.
Kamal Patel.
Yes, yes. Another mentor of mine, Kamal. Yes, yes.
Taft Avenue, 172nd Street.
Yes, taught me, you know, taught me how to be unapologetic about how I show up for my students and how we teach sense of self. And like Kamal was that guy. It's such a small world, and it's good to see that that these brothers live on in the minds of all of us. Keith, you gonna say something?
Yeah, man. As everybody's throwing out some names, I'm sitting here and I have this list, right? But and I'm not going to say everybody, and I apologize to anybody who sees this later and says you didn't mention me, because you know who you are and you know that you deserve to be mentioned. But I will say again, Malik Sabri. I mentioned Dean Remson. I want to say Adrian Williams, who's been with me from since I've been, right? And I can't understate the importance of what she's been in my life. Professors Dees, Professor Murphy. I'm so fortunate to have these people around me, peer mentors, and Michael Presta, Zaire Bashir, and of course my own family member, Ricky Marrero, who there was times that he literally was the stick in my back to prop me up to make sure that I continued to do the work that I did, and I'm honored to be able to name these people, share their names with everybody. So thank you for that opportunity.
Did I leave anybody out before we wrap up, Gene?
Like I said, I mean, I'm just playing my shaker over here, man. I'm just kind of trying to keep time with the band, because, like I said, these people, these forces. One thing, and again, I'm not a professional mentor, but one thing I know that we all need to be a part of a network. And we all need to be able to tap into, plug into energy. Like I worked with Jonathan and Kamal when you guys opened up the school. I was right there with you guys hanging out. I work with your dad. Your dad's supposed to go to Africa with me to do some karate this month, but because of the Omicron, we won't do it. Dr. Brown, Dr. Dees, all these folks. It's a network of people out there. And if any of us get into a conversation with one another, the 5 or 6 of us on this call, we're going to trip over the names of 4 or 5 people who are part of our community, because it's that community that helps us and gives us the sustenance to get back up and to get back in there, because we recognize that the work that we're doing is not for us, it's for our children's children. And it's so critical that we call these names and we be a part of these forces that came before us. And I'm, like I said, I'm just proud to kind of like be with you guys. And truth of the matter is, considering what we're all dealing with, when you get off this Zoom, you're gonna say to yourself, shit, man, damn, I needed that. Because you did. You did. And because this is the work we do, and it's not easy. So I appreciate you, brothers. I love what you're doing. I want to stay connected, and this is what we do.
There's no better way to end. There's no better way to end the session. Thank you for those words, Gene, and thank you for everyone for your time, expertise. We're just gonna have, as we wrap up, we're gonna have our panelists share any websites, social media information that they'd like to share, and any potential upcoming projects that they want to make the community aware of.
You can find me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with you in that social media space.
I can find me on LinkedIn or at BCC website. But I also like to throw out, we know we had a tragedy in the Bronx on Sunday. We have 17 lives that were lost, most of them children. So there are numerous forces, from Bronx Community College to Monroe College to Vanessa Gibson, to a number of community-based groups who are engaged in that. And we need to get the word out to let people know that there is more than ample opportunity for them to give of themselves and their resources to be a part of that.
I'll say I'm not, and Dr. Bethia teases me about this all the time. So you won't find me on social media. However, the program that I'm a part of is called the New York State Mentoring Program. The governor has made it available to all New York State residents. So I'm happy to provide anybody on this call, anybody who sees this video, with consultation, information, and in my time. I'm fortunate enough to do this full time. This is what I do with myself, and I'm happy to be of service So please feel free to reach out to me, Keith Howard, New York State Mentoring Program. And again, the governor has made this support available to you all. So please do take advantage of it.
You can follow me as well on LinkedIn, Dr. Michael Rodriguez. You can follow me on Instagram, Dr. Mike Rod, Dr.Mike_Rod. You could also follow me at Kingsborough's IG, our Men's Center page, KCC_Men's Center. I'd love to connect with you there. You can go to my website, drrod.com, dr-rod.com. And you'll find more information about some of the stuff I do outside of here. You'll find some more information about the book I wrote, Mentoring Myths. I'd love to connect with all you brothers and everyone out there.
And finally, you can, if you're interested in learning more about the movement that is MBK, please make sure to get on our website, www.nycmbk.org. You can also find me on LinkedIn, like many of the brothers on the call, or on Twitter, Dr. Mbathia2. I want to remind us as we wrap up that mentoring is a journey built on relationships and partnerships. And I'm so glad to have had the opportunity to partner with these brothers on the call, learn from them. And I hope I was able to provide a little learning on my own as well. And so on behalf of everybody at CUNY BMI, we just are excited to present this dialogue to you. Catch us on YouTube and social media, and we'll see you around.
Thank you very much, man. Everybody have a great, great day.
Thanks, everyone. It's a blessing. Enjoy your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Loved it. Thank you again.